Hey everybody, it's Will. It is Saturday, April the 14th. So that means it's been 2 weeks since my last update on my great Panamanian stem cell adventure of 2018 and the GoFundMe campaign and all of that. So on the last update, I talked a little bit about my rationalization for doing this, for taking a chance on a relatively cutting-edge medical technology and kind of the statistics of spinal cord injury. So this time I'm going to talk a little bit about what actually happened to me. And quite honestly, this represents a little bit of getting outside of my comfort zone. I just typically don't talk a whole lot about this kind of stuff. It's not so much that I mind talking about it. It's just that I just don't ever really want my identity to be all about my injury, and it just doesn't really do much good to go on about it, and so honestly, even a lot of my close friends don't know exactly the deal. And so this, like I said, is a little bit of getting outside of my comfort zone, but I think that's good because I want to keep it real. I want you guys to know exactly why and what and how and all of that, because you've been kind enough to get involved with this thing. And speaking of that, the GoFundMe campaign has been running for 2 weeks now, I guess, or 3 weeks, and it's up to right at $10,000, which just blows me away. Again, I just don't know how to thank each of you who have contributed to this thing and gotten involved sufficiently. But please know that I do greatly appreciate it. It really has just blown me away, you know, how much people have responded, because I didn't know what to expect. But the more important number is that about 74, 75 people have jumped in. And that's what's really important to me, because what I want to do is tell this story. And I'm not, you know, silly enough to think that it's going to go viral, but I do want as many people as possible to know about this thing, because I'd like to think that I'm making some value out of my situation that could help other people. So anyway, with all that said, here is what happened to me. This is the story of how I got hurt. Basically, I mean, in a nutshell, I got hurt riding my dirt bike. Now, if that's all I say, then a lot of people might say, oh, well, of course you did. Dirt bikes are dangerous. Well, yes and no. I was not doing anything that was out of the ordinary for me. That I had not done literally 1,000 times before. I started riding dirt bikes when I was a kid, pretty small. My older brother was a motocross racer back in the day, and he got me into it. And so by the time I had that fateful day in July of 2009, I had been riding dirt bikes for a couple of decades and done a lot of racing. Motocross and off-road. You know, motocross is the jumpy stuff on a small track, and off-road is, you know, where you might race for 3 hours through the woods or the desert or whatever. And I had several hundred races of each kind under my belt at that point. And I don't think it's unfair to say that I was a good rider. I rode in an expert class and when I raced off-road, and I was a decent local intermediate motocross guy. People told me that I was smooth and fast, and that basically was the result of a lot of practice, a lot of dedicated time at the track, and just lots of experience. But just, you know, to put it in perspective, when I was at the peak of my speed, I might go to an off-road race and be in the 90th percentile, meaning that there were like 10% of the riders who were faster than me, which sounds pretty good. But that gap gets, the gap spreads out there a lot in that last 10%, because while I might have been a pretty decent rider locally, the truth is I wouldn't even have begun to qualify at the national level. I mean, even the local pro guys had a difficult time doing that. It just gets to be a very, very small percentage of people who can really ride at that level on a motocross bike. And you know, but I felt good about my skills, and I'm not telling you any of this to brag about those skills. I'm just trying to sort of frame this in perspective to illustrate the fact that you can be doing everything right, and the universe can take it all away from you in a split second. And this is a really important concept for me, because I was never the kind of guy who took life for granted. I was always trying to squeeze the most out of it that I possibly could. And I believe everybody should do that because, again, you can be doing everything right and it can be gone in a split second. And that's what happened to me. I was riding through a section of a local motocross track that I had experience on, and my back wheel hit a hole or something that caused it to kick sideways. And when you're at that level, there are things that that you calculate in a split second that you can do to try and correct the situation. And I did all those things, and none of them worked. And I still ended up getting ejected at very high speed and thrown into some very hard dirt, like a lawn dart, basically. I broke my fall with my right arm, literally broke because I snapped my right wrist, and then drove my head straight into the ground. It did not knock me out. For better or worse, I was awake for the whole thing, including the next part, which was watching my arm flop in front of my face and wondering whose arm that was because I couldn't feel it. And I knew instantly. I knew what had happened. And honestly, my first thought was just of complete disbelief. Like, holy shit, I can't believe the thing that we as motocross riders dread the most has just happened to me. And I am paralyzed. I mean, I just, that was my first reaction, and just instantly pissed off and, like I said, just in disbelief. But it was like someone had smacked me on the top of the head with a sledgehammer. My supposedly top-of-the-line $500 motocross helmet did basically nothing, I feel, to insulate me from the shock. I mean, helmets are 30 and 40-year-old technology, and if I had any beef with what happened, that might be it. Bright flash of light, and just instantly it shut me off. And so, I was, the ambulance guys came and they carted me off to the hospital, and within the next 24 hours, I learned specifically what my injury was, which was that I had basically exploded the discs in the C3, 4, and 5 vertebrae of my neck. And so what they were going to do was go in there and do a discectomy, which basically it means that they kind of scrape things out and put a titanium cage in there to fuse all three of those vertebrae together and hopefully relieve the pressure on your spinal cord. Basically that's what happened. By the time they operated on me the next day, I could kind of shrug my shoulders a little bit. And that was my first glimmer of hope. But things, take their own course when you have something like a spinal cord injury. And over the next series of updates, I will kind of bring you guys up to speed with the story of how I have recovered from that injury. As I've said before, I've done remarkably well, all things considered, because once again, I'm in a small percentage. Being in the 10% that have any kind of a recovery from a spinal cord injury is a pretty small slice of luck, if that's what you want to call it. So anyway, I don't want to ramble on too much. Been going on for let's see, 8 minutes. So that's enough for now. So that should give you an idea of where I was and how it happened and exactly what the injury was. And hopefully you'll tune in next time to hear what the next 4 months of my life held after the injury. But hey, if you're paying attention at all, if you're watching this at all, I really appreciate it, and I hope you'll stick with me. Thank you.